As I stand before you today, I am reminded of a moment in the concentration camp when a fellow prisoner whispered to me, life has to have meaning in any circumstances. Even in those darkest hours, surrounded by unimaginable suffering, these words resonated with a truth that transcends time and circumstance. Today I share with you not just theories or abstract concepts, but lived experiences and profound truths about finding meaning in our most challenging moments. Let us begin by acknowledging a fundamental truth. Suffering is an inevitable part of human existence. However, what differentiates us as human beings is not the presence of suffering in our lives, but our response to it. In my observations, both in the camps and throughout my years as a practitioner, I have witnessed time and again that those who had something to live for, a purpose, a task, or someone to love, were far more likely to survive even the most horrific circumstances. Consider for a moment the story of a young artist I once treated. She had lost the use of her hands in an accident, seemingly destroying her ability to create art, the very essence of her being. Initially, she fell into deep despair, believing life had lost all meaning. But through our work together, she discovered she could paint with her feet. Not only did she continue her artistic journey, but she found new depths in her creativity, teaching others with similar disabilities. Her suffering became a gateway to a deeper understanding of human resilience and possibility. The search for meaning is not a luxury reserved for times of comfort and ease. On the contrary, it becomes most crucial when we face our greatest challenges. Think of meaning as a light. It shines brightest against the darkest backdrop. In the concentration camps, I observed men who had seemingly lost everything still maintain their inner dignity through small, meaningful acts, sharing their last piece of bread, offering words of comfort to others, or maintaining their sense of humor in the face of death. Let me be clear, I am not suggesting that suffering is necessary for meaning. Rather, meaning is possible in spite of suffering. This distinction is crucial. When we face inevitable suffering, we have the power, indeed the responsibility, to choose our attitude toward it. This is what I call the last of human freedoms. The ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Consider the remarkable case of a businessman I worked with years after the war. He had lost his entire family in a tragic accident and was contemplating suicide. When he came to me, he asked, "What is there left to live for?" Instead of answering directly, I asked him, "What if life is asking something of you?" This shift in perspective from demanding meaning from life to recognizing that life demands something from us was transformative. He eventually established a foundation helping other families cope with similar tragedies, transforming his personal catastrophe into a source of meaning and support for others. The meaning of life, my dear friends, is not some abstract philosophical concept to be pondered in ivory towers. It is as concrete as the tasks that await us each day, as immediate as the person who needs our love, as urgent as the work that demands our dedication. Meaning can be found in three primary ways: through creative work or deeds, through experiencing something or encountering someone, and through the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. Let me share with you a profound truth I've learned. Meaning cannot be given to us. It must be discovered by us. It's like trying to tell someone to appreciate a sunset. You can point to it, but they must experience its beauty themselves. Similarly, we cannot simply tell someone what should give their life meaning. Each person must discover their unique path, their individual calling. I remember a successful executive who came to me deeply depressed despite his achievements. He had wealth, status, and power, yet felt empty inside. Through our discussions, he realized that his true calling was not in accumulating more wealth, but in mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. His face lit up with newfound purpose when he described helping others achieve their dreams. This is what I call the self-transcendent nature of authentic meaning. It always points to something or someone beyond one. The question we must ask ourselves is not what do I want from life, but rather what does life want from me? This subtle shift in perspective opens up entirely new possibilities for finding meaning. Life presents us with situations, challenges, and opportunities. Our task is to respond responsibly, to recognize the unique meaning potential in each moment. Let me tell you about a woman I counseled who lost her job during an economic crisis. Initially, she saw it as a devastating blow to her identity and security. However, as we explored her situation, she began to see it as an opportunity to pursue her long-forgotten dream of becoming a teacher. The crisis became a catalyst for transformation. Today she tells me that losing her job was the best thing that could have happened to her, not because of the suffering it caused, but because it forced her to confront the question of what truly mattered in her life. This brings us to a crucial point. Meaning can be found not only in achievement, but also in the process of striving. I observe that people often become discouraged when they don't immediately reach their goals. But meaning exists in the journey itself, in the daily efforts we make, in the small choices that gradually shape our character and our legacy. Consider the metaphor of a mountain climber. The meaning is not only in reaching the summit, but in every step taken, every obstacle overcome, every moment of perseverance in the face of difficulty. The view from the top is magnificent, yes, but it's the climb that transforms the climber. I must emphasize that finding meaning doesn't require extraordinary circumstances or grand gestures. Meaning can be found in the most ordinary moments of life, in a kind word spoken to someone in pain, in the careful completion of a task, in the quiet appreciation of beauty, in the choice to remain dignified when treated unjustly. Let me share with you the story of a janitor I met at the hospital. When asked about his job, he didn't speak of cleaning floors and emptying trash bins. Instead, he spoke of creating an environment where healing could take place, where patients and their families could focus on recovery without worry about cleanliness and hygiene. He had found profound meaning in what others might consider mundane work. This is what I mean when I say that meaning is available in every moment, every situation, if we have the eyes to see it. The challenge we face today is not a lack of opportunities for meaning, but rather our tendency to look for it in the wrong places. We often search for meaning in success, pleasure, or power, when in fact, meaning finds us in moments of genuine connection, purposeful work, and courageous response to life's challenges. Consider how many of us postpone living meaningfully, waiting for the right circumstances. We say, I'll pursue my true calling once I have more security, or I'll dedicate time to important relationships after I achieve success. But meaning doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It's available to us now, in this moment, regardless of our circumstances. I remember a prisoner in the camps who spent his last cigarette, a precious commodity that could have been traded for food, to provide a moment of pleasure for his dying friend. This act which might seem foolish from a survival perspective, was filled with more meaning than any calculation of practical benefit could measure. It demonstrated the human capacity to choose dignity and love, even in the most dehumanizing circumstances. Let me be clear about something. Finding meaning doesn't mean we will always feel happy or satisfied. Meaningful lives often involve struggle, challenge, and yes, suffering. But meaning provides something more valuable than mere happiness. It gives us the strength to endure, the courage to continue, and the conviction that our lives matter despite our difficulties. I've worked with countless individuals who initially came seeking happiness, but discovered something far more valuable: purpose. There was a young woman, brilliant in her field, who suffered from chronic pain. She couldn't eliminate her pain, but she could choose her attitude toward it. She began writing about her experience helping others with similar conditions. Her suffering didn't diminish, but it took on meaning through her choice to use it as a way to connect with and help others. This brings us to a crucial understanding. Meaning is not something we can pursue directly, like happiness or success. Meaning ensues from our engagement with life, from our willingness to answer life's questions with our actions and attitudes. It's like happiness. The more directly we pursue it, the more it eludes us. But when we dedicate ourselves to a cause greater than ourselves or to the service of others, meaning finds us. Let me share with you what I consider to be one of the most dangerous attitudes in our modern world: the belief that life owes us meaning. Life does not owe us meaning. We owe life. Our full engagement, our best efforts, our willingness to find and fulfill the meaning of each moment. This is not a burden, but a privilege. The privilege of being human, of having the capacity to choose our response to any situation. Consider the difference between two individuals facing similar challenges. One asks, "Why is this happening to me?" While the other asks, "What is this asking of me?" The first question leads to victimhood. The second leads to growth and meaning. This is not mere positive thinking. It's a fundamental orientation toward life that acknowledges both its difficulties and its possibilities. I've observed that people who maintain their sense of meaning through difficult times share certain characteristics. They maintain connections with others. They remain committed to tasks or causes beyond themselves, and they keep their sense of agency, their belief in their ability to choose their response to circumstances. These are not innate traits, but skills we can develop, attitudes we can cultivate. Let me tell you about a group of survivors I worked with after the war. What distinguished those who rebuilt meaningful lives was not the absence of trauma or loss, but their ability to gradually reorient themselves toward the future, toward what life was asking of them now. They didn't deny their past suffering, but refused to let it become the only story of their lives. This brings us to another crucial point. Meaning requires responsibility. We must be willing to take responsibility, not just for our actions, but for finding and fulfilling the meaning potential in our lives. This responsibility can feel heavy at times, but it is also the source of our dignity and worth as human beings. I remember working with a man who had lost his wife and was raising 3 young children alone. He often felt overwhelmed and questioned whether he could manage. But in accepting the responsibility of being both mother and father to his children, he discovered strengths he never knew he had. His love for his children and his commitment to their well-being became the meaning that sustained him through his grief and challenges. We must also understand that meaning is not static. It evolves as our circumstances change. What gives our life meaning in one phase may shift in another. The key is to remain open to these shifts, to continue asking ourselves what life is asking of us now, in this moment, in these circumstances. I've seen this dynamic at work in the lives of retirees who initially struggle with the loss of their professional identity, those who find new meaning, perhaps in mentoring, volunteering, or pursuing long-denied interests, often report feeling more fulfilled than ever. They've understood that meaning isn't tied to a particular role, but to our ongoing dialogue with life. Let me address something that many of you might be thinking. But what if I can't find any meaning in my current situation? This is a valid question, but it perhaps misses the point. Meaning isn't always something we find. Sometimes it's something we create through our choices and actions. Even in situations where we feel powerless, we retain the power to choose our attitude, to decide how we will face our circumstances. Consider the story of a prisoner I knew who used his time in solitary confinement to compose a symphony in his head. He couldn't write it down, couldn't play it, couldn't share it with anyone, but the act of creation itself, the mental discipline required, the beauty he could imagine, these gave meaning to hours that could have been filled with nothing but despair. We must also address the role of failure in our search for meaning. Often, what appears to be failure is actually a crucial step in discovering our true path. I've worked with many individuals who found their most meaningful work only after failing at what they thought they were supposed to do. The key is to remain open to the possibilities that failure reveals, to see it not as an end point, but as a turning point. Let me share another observation. The search for meaning is not a solitary journey. While each person must discover their own unique meaning, we find and fulfill meaning in connection with others, in service to causes greater than ourselves, in leaving the world a bit better than we found it. This is what I mean by self-transcendence, the recognition that meaning often lies in reaching beyond ourselves to touch the lives of others. The task before us now is to translate these principles into daily action, for meaning is not merely a philosophical concept, but a lived reality. Let me share with you another profound observation from my years of work with individuals facing various life challenges. I've noticed that those who maintain a sense of meaning through difficult times often possess what I call an orientation toward possibility. Consider the case of a former athlete I worked with, who became paralyzed after an accident. Initially, he saw only what he had lost, his ability to compete, his physical prowess, his identity as an athlete. But gradually, he began to discover new possibilities. He started coaching young athletes, finding that his experience of overcoming adversity gave him unique insights into helping others face their challenges. His inability to perform physically led to a deeper understanding of the mental and emotional aspects of athletic performance. This brings us to a crucial understanding about meaning. It often emerges from the tension between what is and what could be. This creative tension, this space between reality and possibility, is where meaning takes root and grows. It's not about denying our current circumstances, but about seeing beyond them to the potential they contain. I remember working with a woman who had spent decades in a career she thought she was supposed to want. She came to me feeling empty, despite her obvious success. Through our work together, she began to recognize that meaning isn't found in meeting others' expectations, but in answering life's call authentically. She eventually left her prestigious position to start a small business helping artisans in developing countries market their craft. Her income decreased, but her sense of meaning increased exponentially. Let me emphasize something vital. The search for meaning requires courage. It takes courage to question our assumptions about what makes life worthwhile. It takes courage to step away from the safety of conventional paths. It takes courage to face our fears and limitations while maintaining our commitment to meaningful action. I have observed that many people become stuck in what I call the meaning paralysis. They're so afraid of making the wrong choice that they make no choice at all. But meaning isn't found in perfect decisions. It's found in committed action, in learning from our mistakes, in adjusting our course while maintaining our overall direction toward what we value most. Consider the metaphor of a ship at sea. The captain doesn't have perfect knowledge of what lies ahead, but they maintain their course through constant small adjustments, responding to changing conditions while keeping their destination in mind. Similarly, we find meaning not through perfect foresight, but through responsive. Let me share with you the story of a community leader I worked with who faced seemingly insurmountable challenges in trying to improve conditions in his neighborhood. He couldn't solve all the problems at once, but he focused on what he could do each day. He started with organizing neighborhood cleanups, then moved on to establishing after-school programs, then working on local policy changes. Each small action built upon the others, creating a momentum of meaningful change. This brings us to another crucial point. Meaning often reveals itself retrospectively. We may not always see the significance of our actions in the moment, but looking back, we can trace the pattern of meaning that emerged from our choices. This is why it's so important to act with intention and integrity, even when we are uncertain about the outcome. I've worked with many individuals who initially felt their lives were meaningless because they couldn't see any immediate impact from their efforts. But meaning isn't always about immediate results. Sometimes it's about planting seeds that will grow long after we are gone, about contributing to a story larger than our individual lives. Consider the teacher who influences thousands of students over a career, never fully knowing how their words and actions shape future generations. Or the parent who makes countless small sacrifices day after day, building character and resilience in their children through consistent loving actions. These are examples of meaning that unfolds over time, that requires faith in the significance of our choices, even when we can't see their full impact. Let me address another common obstacle to finding meaning, the tyranny of comparison. In our interconnected world, it's easy to become discouraged by comparing our impact to others who seem to be doing more, achieving more, contributing more. But meaning isn't measured by external metrics. The significance of our actions isn't determined by the I remember working with a hospice volunteer who worried that her contribution was too small to matter. She spent time sitting with dying patients, holding their hands, listening to their stories. When we explored the meaning of her work, she began to understand that these intimate moments of human connection were profoundly meaningful, both for her patients and for herself. Not every meaningful action changes the world, but every meaningful action changes something or someone. This brings us to the importance of presence in finding meaning. Often we are so focused on future goals or past regrets that we miss the meaning available in the present moment. True meaning requires our full engagement with the here and now. Our willingness to be present to whatever life is presenting us with in this moment. Let me share an observation from my clinical work. Those who find lasting meaning tend to develop what I call meaning awareness. the ability to recognize and respond to opportunities for meaningful action in everyday situations. This might be as simple as truly listening to someone who needs to be heard, or taking extra care with a task that affects others, or choosing to respond with kindness to someone who is struggling. Consider how this awareness transforms ordinary interactions. A store clerk who sees their work not just as processing transactions, but as an opportunity to provide moments of human connection. A bus driver who understands they are not just operating a vehicle, but creating a safe space for their passengers. A parent who views daily routines not as tedious tasks, but as opportunities to build trust and security with their children. This brings us to another vital understanding. Meaning isn't something we find once and possess forever. It's something we must continually discover and create through our choices and actions. Each day presents new opportunities for meaningful engagement with life, new questions that demand our response. I've observed that people who maintain a strong sense of meaning through life's changes share a common characteristic. They remain curious about what life is asking of them. They don't assume they figured it all out, but rather maintain an attitude of openness to new possibilities for meaningful action and connection. Let me share with you the story of an elderly man I worked with who lost his wife after 50 years of marriage. His initial response was to withdraw from life, feeling that all meaning had died with his spouse. But gradually he began to ask himself what his experience might offer others. He started facilitating a grief support group where his personal understanding of loss became a source of comfort and guidance for others. His suffering didn't diminish, but it took on new meaning through his choice to use it in service of others. This illustrates another crucial point. Meaning often emerges from our willingness to transform personal challenges into sources of understanding and connection with others. Our difficulties, when approached with this perspective, can become bridges of empathy and compassion. Consider how this principle applies in various contexts. The recovered addict who becomes a counselor, the person who has overcome financial hardship, who teaches others about financial literacy, the individual who has faced discrimination, who works to create more inclusive communities. Each has found meaning not despite their challenges, but through their response to them. Let me emphasize something that might seem counterintuitive. The search for meaning often requires us to embrace uncertainty. We may not always know where our choices will lead, but we can know whether they align with our values and our understanding of what life is asking of us in this moment. I've worked with many individuals who struggled with this uncertainty, wanting guarantees before committing to meaningful action, but meaning reveals itself through engagement, through our willingness to step into the unknown while remaining true to our values and responsive to life's calls. This brings us to the role of relationships in finding meaning. While each person must discover their own unique path to meaning, we find and fulfill meaning in connection with others. Our meaningful actions ripple out, touching lives in ways we may never fully know. Consider the interconnected nature of meaningful action. A teacher inspires a student who goes on to create positive change in their community. A kind word spoken at the right moment gives someone the courage to persist in their own meaningful work. A small act of generosity sparks a chain reaction of goodwill. This is how meaning multiplies and spreads through human connection. Consider the case of a middle-aged professional I worked with who felt trapped in what he called a meaning vacuum. Despite material success, he experienced what many of you might recognize, a gnawing sense of emptiness, a question of, is this all there is? His situation illustrates a common phenomenon in our modern world, the achievement of conventional success without the fulfillment of meaningful engagement. But we discovered together what that meaning often hides in plain sight. In his case, he had been overlooking countless opportunities for meaningful action in his daily interactions with colleagues, in his ability to mentor younger professionals, in his potential to influence his organization's culture in positive ways. The transformation began when he started viewing his role not just as a job, but as a platform for meaningful impact. This brings us to a crucial understanding about the nature of meaningful work. Any work, regardless of its apparent status or importance, can become a source of meaning when we approach it with what I call meaning consciousness. This is the awareness that every task, every interaction carries the potential for meaningful engagement. Let me share with you the story of a hospital custodian I encountered who exemplified this principle. When asked about her work, she described herself as part of the healing team. She explained how keeping spaces clean and sanitized prevented infections, how her friendly presence in the hallways often provided comfort to worried family members. She had transformed what many might view as menial work into a deeply meaningful vocation. This transformation of perspective is available to all of us, but it requires something specific: the willingness to see beyond the surface of our daily activities to their deeper significance. Consider how this might apply in your own life. The parent preparing a meal isn't just cooking food, but creating a space for family connection. The accountant reviewing financial statements isn't just checking numbers, but helping ensure the financial health of organizations that employ people and serve communities. I have observed that people who maintain a strong sense of meaning share a particular characteristic. They understand the difference between their task and their purpose. The task might be entering data, driving a bus, or managing a team, but the purpose is always connected to human value and impact. Let me address something that often comes up in my work with individuals seeking meaning: the fear that their contribution is too small to matter. This fear can be paralyzing, preventing people from taking meaningful action because they compare their potential impact to grand, world-changing achievements. But meaning doesn't require us to change the world. It requires us to change our part of it, however small that might be. Consider the ripple effect of seemingly small actions. A teacher who takes an extra moment to encourage a struggling student might influence not just that student's life, but the lives of everyone that student will later impact. A healthcare worker who shows particular kindness to an elderly patient might restore that person's sense of dignity, affecting how they interact with their family and others. This brings us to another crucial aspect of finding meaning: the importance of persistence in the face of uncertainty. Often, we don't see the full impact of our meaningful actions immediately. This requires what I call meaning faith, the belief that our authentic efforts to contribute value will bear fruit, even if we can't see how or when. I remember working with an environmental activist who became discouraged because she couldn't see immediate results from her efforts to protect local wildlife. What helped her maintain her commitment was shifting her focus from immediate outcomes to the integrity of her actions. She came to understand that meaning resides not just in achieving goals, but in maintaining faithful effort toward what we value. Let me share another observation about the nature of meaningful action. It often requires us to step out of our comfort zone. Meaning frequently lies just beyond the boundaries of what feels safe and familiar. This doesn't mean we need to make dramatic changes. Sometimes it's as simple as speaking up when we would usually remain silent, extending ourselves to someone when we would usually hold back, or taking on a challenge we would usually hold back. Or consider the case of a retiree I worked with who initially felt lost without his career identity. He began volunteering at a local literacy program, something he had never done before. At first he felt awkward and uncertain, but as he developed relationships with his adult students and saw their progress, he discovered a sense of meaning that surpassed what he had found in his professional life. This brings us to another vital understanding. Meaning often emerges from our response to life's limitations and challenges. We might not choose our circumstances, but we always choose our response to them. This choice is where meaning resides. I've worked with individuals facing severe physical limitations who have found profound meaning in how they choose to live within those limitations. One woman, confined to her home by chronic illness, created an online support community for others in similar situations. Her physical restrictions became the very context for her meaningful contribution to others. Let me emphasize something about the relationship between meaning and happiness. While they related, they are not the same thing. Meaningful actions don't always produce immediate happiness or satisfaction. Sometimes they involve sacrifice, difficulty, or discomfort. But they provide something deeper, a sense of living in alignment with our values and responding authentically to life's calls. Consider how this plays out in parenting, caring for elderly parents, pursuing challenging but worthwhile goals, or standing up for what we believe is right. These actions might not make us happy in the moment, but they fill us with a sense of purpose and significance that transcends temporary emotional states. This brings us to the importance of what I call meaning resilience. The ability to maintain our commitment to meaningful action, even when we face setbacks or disappointments. This resilience comes from understanding that meaning is not dependent on outcomes, but on the quality of our engagement and the integrity of our choices. I've observed that people who develop this resilience share certain practices. They regularly reflect on their values and priorities. They maintain connections with others who support their meaningful endeavors, and they view setbacks as opportunities for learning and growth rather than as final verdicts on their efforts. Let me share with you the story of an entrepreneur whose first several ventures failed. Rather than seeing these failures as proof that his efforts were meaningless, he viewed them as valuable learning experiences that helped him understand what was truly important to him and how he could better serve others through his work. Today, he runs a successful business that aligns with his values and provides significant value to his community. This brings us to another crucial aspect of finding meaning, the importance of authenticity. Meaning cannot be copied from others or imposed from outside. It must emerge from our genuine values and aspirations. This requires us to know ourselves well enough to distinguish between what we think we should find meaningful and what truly resonates with our deepest value. Consider how many people pursue paths that others have defined as meaningful, only to find themselves feeling empty and disconnected. The lawyer who would rather be teaching, the executive who dreams of running a small farm, the academic who longs to be an artist. These individuals often need permission to pursue what they genuinely find meaningful, rather than what society deems successful. Let me emphasize something about this process of discovering authentic meaning. It often requires us to question our assumptions about what constitutes a meaningful life. Sometimes what we think will bring meaning turns out to be a superficial substitute for deeper engagement with life. I work with many individuals who discovered that their preconceptions about meaning were actually barriers to finding it. They needed to let go of rigid ideas about what a meaningful life should look like in order to recognize the meaning potential in their actual circumstances. This brings us to the role of community in finding and maintaining meaning. While meaning is personally discovered, it is often socially sustained. We need others who understand and support our meaningful pursuits, who can remind us of our purpose when we feel lost, who can share in both our struggles and our successes. Consider how meaning multiplies when shared with others. A group of environmental advocates supporting each other's efforts. A community of artists inspiring each other's creativity. A network of social workers sharing resources and encouragement. These connections enhance and sustain meaningful action. As we draw this exploration to a close, remember that the search for meaning is not a destination, but a journey. It's not about finding the one perfect path, but about maintaining our commitment to meaningful engagement with life in all its complexity and challenge. Your task is not to replicate someone else's path to meaning, but to discover and create your own. Trust that your authentic efforts to contribute value, to respond to life's calls with integrity, and to maintain meaningful connections with others will lead you toward a life rich in purpose and significance. May you move forward with courage, clarity, and commitment to discovering and creating meaning in your unique way. Thank you for your sustained engagement with these vital questions about living a meaningful life.